At least 5 of them was wrong, right? Because they need a quarterback in the best way. You talk about from extremes. You said fighting for a roster spot to potentially being a starter.
Right.
Like, what do we do? It's a lot of in between. So you mean to tell me that that's a 5th round pick? I think it's laughable that that so many teams passed on him over and over again.
So why do you
half
think
of the 4th round?
That's the question.
Because they cut their nose to spite their face.
Create these stories and then attach them to a kid that ain't never done nothing wrong.
Yeah. How does that make you feel when you see your colleagues or your peers going in on you, man? Like, how does that make you feel?
No idea, man.
The controversy surrounding Shedeur Sanders' draft placement has ignited widespread debate within NFL circles. Despite a standout college career and clear potential as a franchise quarterback, Sanders slipped further down the draft board than many expected. Former NFL players and analysts have begun questioning the motives behind this slide, with Bart appearing on ESPN pointing to what he believes was a deliberate effort by teams to avoid picking Sanders early. The suggestion that teams overlooked him not due to performance but for less transparent reasons has fueled ongoing conversations about bias and politics in the NFL draft process. Bart emphasized that Shedeur Sanders was not just a viable option but an ideal fit for several teams in need of a quarterback. According to Scott, this wasn't a matter of debate, it was a missed opportunity of significant proportions. He pointed out that the evaluators and scouts involved in the drafting process had all the data, film, and performance metrics needed to make the right call, yet they chose to overlook Sanders. In his view, that decision is going to cost them as the season unfolds and Sanders begins to prove his worth on the field. Scott warned that some front office personnel might find themselves out of a job for letting such a talent slip through their fingers.
They were trying to make a lot of those guys that made those picks. I guarantee you at least 3 or 4 of them is going to be an unemployment line. It's going to be because they didn't find a quarterback that they were looking for, whether it's general manager or head coach.
You said
the Deion thing might not have been, hey, I'm scared that Deion's going to take my job or that Deion's going to end up.
Shame on you if that even.
Deion Sanders,
you deserve to be fired if you're afraid of a man taking your job, so you don't take his son.
If Flacco's getting the reps or if Dylan Gabriel beats him out, it could happen. They drafted Dylan. Is everyone else just an idiot because that happened?
Yes.
Previously, Deion Sanders didn't hold back when addressing the wave of criticism aimed at his son. Speaking out with trademark intensity, Coach Prime condemned what he called a campaign of false narratives targeting Shedeur. According to Deion, the attacks had little to do with Shedeur's talent or conduct and everything to do with his last name. In his eyes, Shedeur has consistently delivered on and off the field, leading, performing, and carrying himself with professionalism. Yet the criticism persisted. For Deion, it's no longer just about football, it's become deeply personal. He believes the treatment Shedeur has received reflects a broader issue of bias and resentment, rooted not in merit, but in the fact that he is Deion's son.
I know there's a lot of rumors about the next level, and I can't see that. I can't see the next level, and I think a couple people who may have taken shots at my kids, they were afraid that I would go. That's where the shots came from. All you got to do is just sit back and listen. People don't want to do that. They want to create these narratives and create these stories and then attach them to a kid that ain't never done nothing wrong.
But what exactly sparked this fiasco? Why are so many scrambling to justify their decisions and actions against Shedeur Sanders? And what drives the harsh labels thrown at those who stood against him? The answer, many believe, lies with the media, NFL pundits, and even coaches who have openly expressed disdain for what they perceive as Shedeur Sanders' cocky demeanor.
NFL interview, you heard Shady McCoy give out a chuckle. Brash and arrogant is what they said about Shedeur
Picking
Sanders.
in the top 7.
No doubt about it. That's the quarterback coach. 2-5, I'm gonna let you sound off real quick. What do you make of it? Do you have an issue with it?
Yeah, I do. I mean, you could say this to your coaches, your ownership, your GM, right? But why are you saying it to the media, right? Another thing is like, I hate when people don't ever like put a name on it.
This didn't stop there. Critics jumped on the moment and the media followed with relentless momentum. Prominent voices like Colin Cowherd publicly labeled Shedeur and his family as egoistic, criticizing their selective stance on potential team destinations. What began as speculation soon spiraled into a full-blown agenda. The narrative shifted. Headlines became fixated on attitude rather than athleticism, character over capability. Franchises wary of the noise and controversy began to tread carefully.
But he is a 500 quarterback who couldn't get drafted in the first round. It's a little much. Everything is something, nothing is everything.
At the peak of the controversy, Colin Cowherd doubled down with sharp criticism, openly mocking Deion Sanders and suggesting he had overhyped his son. In Cowherd's view, Deion hadn't instilled humility in Shedeur. Instead, he implied Deion was capitalizing on his son's growing fame. It was a harsh and polarizing take, one that sidestepped Shedeur's proven abilities, impressive stats, and leadership on the field. Rather than acknowledging the quarterback's performance, Cowherd chose to spotlight family optics and media perception, fueling the narrative that had already begun to overshadow the truth.
The thing about Shedeur, I am the guy that's been pushing him to the greatness. I want to see Shedeur picked early. I want to see Shedeur picked as the first quarterback taken off the board. But Shedeur also does not want to be challenged. I've said certain things that I'm just keeping it a buck and just say how I feel. That doesn't negate how I feel about him, his brother, his other brother, his sister, and his father.
Respectfully,
So
listen, I'm not.
Cam Newton didn't stop at challenging Shedeur's mindset. He took it a step further by questioning the legitimacy of his on-field accomplishments. Newton suggested that Shedeur had operated in convenient positions, hinting that his success stemmed more from controlled environments and favorable setups than from raw talent or perseverance. The implication was clear: Shedeur's rise was cushioned, not earned, a narrative that continued to cast shadows over his draft stock, despite the numbers and leadership he consistently delivered.
Listen, I'm not refuting what you're saying. I'm trying to comprehend what you're saying. What do you mean he doesn't want to be challenged?
That got my attention too.
So
I'm asking. You on first take. You damn right I'm asking you.
There's been history there, and I've always challenged Shedeur publicly and to him in ways that, like, bro, I want to see the best version of Shedeur.
But despite the trash talk, the doubts, and the barrage of public criticism, neither Shedeur nor Deion Sanders fired back. They chose silence, not out of hesitation, but with intention. Their strategy was clear: let Shedeur's game speak for itself. And it did. As the performances piled up, even some of the harshest critics began to shift their tone. That's when Deion finally spoke. But this time, it wasn't just a defense, it was a direct challenge. He questioned the motives behind the smear campaign, asking how anyone could ignore Shedeur's tireless work ethic, steady leadership, and consistent production, and still argue he wasn't ready.
He's been in front of the camera, so they know how to navigate, they know how to handle themselves.
Yeah.
And you're not gonna catch them in no foolery and no mess. You're not, when you sit up there and say something like he went in a meeting unprepared, like, dude, Deion Sanders, who's had 6 different coordinators, who has still functioned and went up, leveled up every time we brought somebody new in, and you're gonna tell me he
every situation.
You're gonna tell me he had on headphones?
Deion Sanders was right all along. The tables did turn. He had always believed that the day would come when the same voices that once tried to discredit Shedeur would be forced to recognize his talent, and now that moment has arrived. Colin Cowherd, once among Shedeur's most vocal critics, has completely reversed his stance. He's now praising Shedeur as one of the best quarterbacks on the Browns roster, even suggesting he should be the first-team starter, ahead of seasoned veteran Joe Flacco and rookie Dillon Gabriel. It's a dramatic shift in tone, one that underscores just how far Shedeur has come, not just by proving doubters wrong, but by commanding their respect. Deion Sanders eventually broke his silence on the draft saga, offering his own perspective on the whirlwind of criticism and the smear campaign that surrounded him leading up to draft day. Reflecting on the experience, he shared that he never let the negativity get to him. Instead of responding with anger or frustration, he chose to stay focused and motivated. Shedeur admitted he didn't take the noise too seriously, not because it didn't sting, but because he knew the people criticizing him didn't truly understand who he is or how he lives his life. For him, the goal was simple: push harder, work smarter, and prove them wrong through action, not words.
That's where the shots came from. All you gotta do is just sit back and listen. People don't want to do that. They want to create these narratives and create these stories and then attach them to a kid that ain't never done nothing wrong.
Yeah. How does that make you feel when you see your colleagues or your peers going in on you, man? Like, how does that make you feel?
No idea, man. You have no idea. We've always been in front of the camera, so they know how to navigate, they know how to handle themselves.
Yeah.
And you're not gonna catch them in no foolery and no mess. You're not, when you sit up there and say something like he went in a meeting unprepared, like, dude, Deion Sanders, who's had 6 different coordinators,
What once looked like a puzzling drop in draft position now appears to have been driven more by media narratives, biased commentary, and questionable decisions by NFL front offices than by any legitimate concern over Shedeur's talent. Despite clear quarterback needs across the league, teams chose to pass on him, not because he lacked ability, but because of a perception shaped by critics and pundits who never truly knew him. Ironically, in trying to sideline Sanders, they've only exposed their own short-sightedness. Now, with a real chance to become the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, Shedeur's rise is becoming one of the most compelling storylines in recent NFL memory. Every snap he takes, every throw he completes, will serve as a reminder of what other teams passed up. His journey has become a reflection not just of personal resilience, but of how the league misjudged one of its brightest prospects. And if he delivers as expected, the regret won't belong to Shedeur. It will belong to every team that let him slip away. What do you think about the way Shedeur Sanders was treated during the draft process? Was it truly about performance, or was it a calculated effort to diminish his value because of who he is and where he comes from? Do you believe the media and NFL insiders shaped a narrative that influenced front office decisions? And now that Shedeur is proving himself, do those same voices owe him an apology? As he inches closer to a potential starting role with the Browns, will the teams that passed on him come to regret it? Let us know in the comments. Was this just business, as usual in the NFL, or something deeper?